You see some of the speakers online. Dr. Carrie Williams is going to be our initial speaker. Can't get my screen shared at the moment, but she's going to talk with us about COVID-19 and the equine industry, and probably some of that'll go over into other ag industries as well. Then Steve Comar, a county agricultural agent from Sussex County, is going to talk with us about renovating pastures. And then Christian Bench from the North Jersey RC&D with USDA is going to talk with us about a renovation seeder that they use and make available to producers. Please remember that we're going to have a similar meeting tomorrow evening, starting at the same time. The subject matter of that meeting will be it'll be Bill Bamke is gonna lead us off tomorrow night talking about weed identification. I'm going to talk about manure management on pasture, and then Caitlin Farbotnik from the USDA NRCS office is going to talk with us about funding opportunities for New Jersey farms. At that, I want to go ahead and introduce to you Dr. Carrie Williams. She's an equine specialist at Rutgers University. She's been with Rutgers for, I think, 17 years now, and great colleague. And she's going to talk with us tonight about COVID-19. A couple comments also, if you have questions, don't use the Q&A, put your questions in the chat. That we weren't having much success on the Q&A earlier, so put your questions in the chat, and one of us that's online will go ahead and try to take a stab at your questions. And also, this event is similar to some events we've had in the past. We called them wine and equine events. Some of you maybe were aware of those. Where we had a field day on an equine farm, and we supplied wine for the meeting as well. Well, obviously we're not supplying wine this evening, but I'll let Dr. Williams go ahead and explain that. So, Dr. Williams, go ahead. You can share your screen.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for being here and for joining us. So I am going to share my screen because we're going to do something a little bit different than some of the last webinars you've heard from me in terms of a PowerPoint presentation. But first, I just want to mention the wine and equine events we've had. You know, we've called them an Evening of Wine and Equine. And I know some of the names on the attendees list looked a little familiar, so I'm sure some of you have been to them. They started 2 years ago. We went around to various farms in North, South, and Central Jersey. We did some pasture walks, we did some brief lectures. We partnered with NRCS to give you information about pastures and some of their resources that they could provide for you. They were very, very popular because along with being at a farm and giving you equine advice, we also partnered with a local winery, and the wineries would come and do some wine tastings and sell bottles as well. So because wine is another one of the big ag industries in the state of New Jersey, we thought it was a very nice pairing. And to tell you the truth, wine and equine are probably two of my most favorite things. So it worked out really, really well. And I will say, I won't be drinking while I'm talking to you, but when I'm done, I have mine available as well from my favorite winery, Cream Ridge, New Jersey, or Cream Ridge Winery in Cream Ridge, New Jersey. They've hosted several of our events, or not hosted, they've hosted one, but they've been to several of our events in North and in Central Jersey. So they're a really big supporter of some of our equine events, and I obviously am a big supporter of their winery. So hopefully you got the BYOW, bring your own wine to this event. So that's what I hope you're all doing, and just here to learn a little bit and enjoy some education in a time where we can't host seminars. So what I'm going to do for you right now, like I said, I don't have a PowerPoint plan, but what I'm going to do is give you some resources that have been compiled in various sources that really deal with a lot of the questions that we all have been getting during this time of COVID. So resources for farms, resources for you, where can you go, what do you want to know? So I'm going to go ahead and just lay out all these resources. I'm going to bring back open the chat because I have a few links that I'm going to post for you as I go in the chat box. So that way you can pull them up, you can save them to your desktop or however you want to save them in Outlook. And that way you can look at them at a later date or a later time. So that's kind of what I'm going to do for you today. And then it should only take about 10 minutes. And then after that, hopefully I have a little bit of time and you can ask me some questions and I will see what I can do for you. So the first one, of course, I can't not start with the Equine Science Center. So Rutgers Equine Science Center has a wonderful website. And here is one of the pages. I actually pulled up their COVID-19 resource page, but I'm going to type in the chat box their main page, which is just esc.rutgers.edu. And they have a whole host of information for horse owners, not just management related, but, fun things for kids to do, a Q&A, Ask the Expert Q&A, and, at this time, a really, really highly active COVID-19 resources for New Jersey page. So I'll try to move that out of the way so you can all see the whole thing. So we have various sites. I'm not going to pull open all of them. I'm just going to show you what is here, and I will highlight some of the other ones. So in New Jersey and COVID, the main site takes you to anything that deals with New Jersey specific regulations and, the things the governor said and posted and things like that. So if you want kind of the latest up-to-date news and information, you can go to their main site, then their COVID dashboard, and they've got a lot of other stuff for New Jersey workers and benefits and things. Not all farm related, just New Jersey in general. New Jersey Department of Ag has some, just a few things for farmers, as well as the New Jersey Farm Bureau. They've been doing a lot of advising for the Department of Agriculture on things related to COVID as well. So both of those websites would be good to check out and to look at. Same with the American Association of Equine Practitioners, or AAEP. Some of the ones I want to probably spend a little more time on are going to be the Extension Horses page, American Horse Council, and United Horse Coalition. We're going to go through those three in a little bit more detail. But before I want to do that, I do want to take you to one other area on their website here, which is their news site. So let me see if I can go back to. So once you're on the home page, it'll pretty much pop up and take you to a couple hot news button items. And what they've done, so see, we've advertised our wine and equine tonight and tomorrow night. But they've also done a general information on keeping engaged while staying safe. So a lot of these are things that horse owners just might want to know on a daily basis, from owning horses to pasture care, farm care, horse care, etc. But they've compiled them in a little bit different way. So there's the 5th, 4th, there's all these different editions there. So they give you fun tools and things that you can go through, whether you're just bored and at home or whether you have maybe horse owning kids that want something to do. There's some great resources there. So let me actually go back to the COVID. And I'm going to type that in the chat box as well. So if anybody wants that link directly to their COVID resources page. So the next one I'm going to go to is this Extension Horses. I already clicked on it, so I didn't have to worry about it coming. But if you go to the main page for Extension Horses, it's going to look like this. It's extensionhorses.org, or you'll see it in this as horses.extension.org. They both go to the same place. So I think extensionhorses.org is just easier to remember. So they have a lot of really nice resources. There is these 3 infographics, which are really kind of nicely put together about defining essential care, using personal preparedness plan, and then what activities are essential during the pandemic. So there's some nice things as well. Then they highlight some webinars, and the really nice thing that they've done is put together a series of webinars, and I'm going to show you those in just a minute, that are specific webinars for COVID type help basically for horse owners and horse farm owners. So I'm going to show you those in just a little bit, but let me scroll down and show you some other things too. There is these free resources for educators. Let me see, I'll just click on that one, see if it does come up quickly for me. It'll take you to this campus website. Yes, you have to sign in, but that's just so that you can get emails if new courses come up. We're not going to send you a lot of spam or anything, but once you log in, and I'm not going to do it because my login is actually not a user login, it's the admin login. We've got a lot of free resources there, free courses that you can take on anything, literally anything from nutrition, management. I mean, I stuck on those because those are the ones I've helped with, but there's an awful lot there that are free classes, again, so if you need information there. But where you can go for those webinars is the YouTube channel, so you can either click on that YouTube webinar right down here, or if you go all the way back to the top, there's all those social media buttons, and we are on all those social media buttons. And the reason why I say we is because e-extension or horses extension is a compilation of equine specialists from across the country. So pretty much every state has a specialist like me, or a county person that is helping educate their clients and their clientele. So here we have done a lot of educational resources. There's some infographics, podcasts, a whole bunch of different articles and other resources. And then social media and whatever platform you decide you want to have and have fun with. So if you do click on the YouTube link, it will take you, as soon as that goes away, to this site. And we have a ton of educational videos here. Some of them are a little dated, but a lot of them are fairly new. And you can see this top bar across the top is the latest webinars that we have done. And if you look at this first one, which was the most recent in our series of 3 YouTube COVID webinars, was on fine-tuning boarding contracts. They got into the legal side of owning horses because we've had a lot of questions from horse farm owners that their horse owners or the boarders aren't very happy with some of the decisions they've made. So there's a lot of information there for you. The one before that was on biosecurity and facility sanitation. So he goes through a really nice discussion of how to keep your farm biosecure, not just for COVID, but for any disease, but then specifically how to sanitize various areas around your farm, including halters and leather and things like that. And then the one that I helped organize was about a month ago on financial assistance for horse farm operations. And that one was extremely popular, probably the most I've ever had on a webinar. I think we had 380 attendees on that one. And it starts by going through some of the United Horse Council, the United Horse Coalition information for you, as well as the American Horse Council information for you, and that's what I'm going to take you to next. And he did an excellent job describing what financial assistance opportunities are available for horse owners and for horse nonprofits as well. So that one I would highly recommend listening to. So he will talk about a lot of resources available on the American Horse Council website, and that's what I'll take you to next, which has a lot of different resources for horse owners. And it starts off with just general information as it pertains to both humans and horses, some safety net programs for you and your business, keeping busy while at home, a bunch of different webinars for you, some more financial assistance, etc. And then there's a whole section for nonprofits. So if you are a nonprofit, I know a few of you that might be on do have nonprofits, some more biosecurity information, some more financial resources, some webinars, etc. And then it gets into those for equine businesses as well. So there's an awful lot of information. And then industry employees. So really this website, which I've been slow to post my links. So here is the extension horses link. then here is the Horse Council. That's what I was just telling you is what I'm on right now. The link to the American Horse Council's resource page. So again, it could take you hours to go through all these resources, but I would say if you're looking for something that deals with COVID and horses, this would be your website to go to, because it really details a lot of information. They even have some kind of fun little little infographics. So again, that's quite an extensive, really nice website there. And then the last one that I mentioned was the United Horse Coalition. Looks very similar because they do work a lot with the American Horse Council. So it does look similar, and they have some similar resources to like some of these general, some of the safety nets, things like that. But they have a lot of these fun little infographics. So if you want to post them on your farm website, or you know, put them in a newsletter, if you're part of a group in a newsletter, you can click on any of these and actually open them up and print them out or use them on your website, you know, however you want to do it. So they really have some nice little infographics there as well, along with a lot of other things. So again, open, that one is in the chat box. That's United Horse Coalition and their resources. So just to quickly recap, we had the United Horse Coalition, the American Horse Council, the extensionhorses.org YouTube site. And again, you could probably be on this website for hours going through all of the resources that they have. If you or anyone you know is involved in showmanship, I actually just listened to parts of this because we teach a lot of that at Rutgers and had to do it remotely, and that was fun. But there's a really nice 2-hour showmanship clinic here, and it is wonderful. Anybody who's involved with showmanship should really listen to that. So there's a lot of information there. And then same with the extensionhorses.org website. And then, of course, back to just where I started, the Equine Science Center at Rutgers site. So esc.rutgers.edu, better horse care for research and education. So that's about all I had. I want to stay within my time frame, but if there are any quick questions, I could try to answer them. I'm not sure if anything came through, but I can stop sharing my screen so the next speaker can get set up while I am answering questions. Oh, that is one thing I did forget to mention. Will the presentations be posted? Yes. So I didn't show you the Equine Science Center's YouTube page. They do. So go back to esc.rutgers.edu, and up in their top bar, they've got all of their social media. Go to YouTube. And we had past webinars. We've had 3 past webinars, which will all be posted. If they aren't by tomorrow morning, they will be. Both of these webinars today and tomorrow will also be posted on the Equine Science Center's YouTube page. So please feel free to send them to anyone who wasn't able to make it. And if you weren't able to make the ones in the past, they were all on pasture management as well. You know, feel free to look at them there as well. And with that, Mike, I think I'm done. I think you need to unmute. So Steve, I guess if you want to unmute and take over.
Okay, are we good?
Yes, I'm not sure. I think Mike was trying to speak, but he wasn't coming through. So I would say you're up.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I think this is a pretty fitting topic for this time of the year. Right about now, every year we get flooded with calls with folks concerned about their pastures not coming back the way they liked. And so we're going to go over some of the ways that that I like to, in particular, review the status of a pasture when I come to first evaluate it. And then after that, Christian's going to talk about some of the methods that we can go if we do decide that we want to make some renovation decisions down the road. So I'm going to start with little questions for everybody to answer. Should our pastures look like this? And I apologize, I can't see the chat window when I'm presenting. So when we have a picture of an ideal pasture in our head, this is generally what we think about. Beautiful cover, relatively few animals in a relatively large area, to have plenty of grass to graze, and so we start thinking this is the picture that we get in our brain about what a pasture should look like. Or should it look like this? You can see some pretty obvious bare spots, lots of weed concern, any grass seedlings that are coming up. Obviously, we had some friends from Canada or local Canadian residents coming in and picking a lot of them up. And so we really kind of struggle between the idyllic version of what our pasture should look like and sometimes what we're actually faced with. And there are several reasons why we end up with the second picture rather than the first picture. And we're going to go over a couple of those right now. But which one is right? When we're thinking about the pasture, most of us might say that the top right picture is what we're aiming for in our pasture management. But as you can see in the picture on the left, a lot of times we have concerns with overstocking, high stocking densities. Maybe the economics of our operation really dictates that we have to have as many animals as possible on farm. And we certainly have some animals that have concerns eating the thick, lush pasture that we might see on the top right, whether we're talking about an easy keeper or an animal with some of the other concerns related to really thick, lush growing pastures. So really the answer is it depends on whether or not we should renovate or not, and it's really going to be dependent on your situation, and frankly, whether or not you should renovate is going to be an important consideration before we spend a lot of time and energy. This time of year, we get tons of calls, as I have already mentioned, with folks asking, oh, my pastures didn't come up well, I just want to throw some seed out there and really try. And a lot of times, depending on our densities and our situations, it may not be feasible to actually go out there and renovate our pasture. So what we're going to discuss today is what I consider to be the steps to renovation decision making. And when we're thinking about whether or not we are going to renovate our pastures and spend the time and effort to do this, and frankly the money, a couple of things that I really like to consider, and those are animal density, or what we call the stocking rate. You might hear sometimes folks will call it the stocking density. And the plant density or the stand health of the individual pasture that we're evaluating. So when I go out to look at a field, these are the two things that I'm thinking about when I go and make a decision whether or not I recommend a renovation or not. So real quick, just to kind of get us all thinking along the same way, in this animal density quiz, as I like to think of it, we have a 1 acre paddock pictured on the top right picture. And as you can see, we have 5 horses in this pasture. It's relatively poor soil. We have no opportunity to rotate these animals into another pasture to give this pasture some time to recuperate. So all these factors together, the question is, should we renovate? And I would argue no, and most of you would probably think the same way. It's going to be very, very difficult to maintain a healthy pasture when we have this high of a stocking density with absolutely no opportunity to rotate. And when we have this kind of a situation, we're not going to talk about it today, but we might look into some of the other alternative ways of keeping animals, like stocking, having a sacrifice area, or sections of the pasture that we're just going to let go and have free choice hay and such. But in this situation, it really would be very difficult, if not impossible, to maintain a healthy pasture under these situations. So when we talk about animal density, it's often one of the last things that we consider in our renovation decision. As I talked about before, we have lots of other factors that go into how many animals that we need, whether it's for economics or whether it's just a situation on our farms relative to the size of our operation. It's rarely considered in our renovation decisions. But honestly, it's perhaps the most important factor that we should consider when we're putting animals out on our field, and whether or not we want to spend that energy and time to try to renovate. And honestly and frankly, in some instances, the biology, or actually what we would consider to be the physiology of the grasses, makes a successful renovation impossible. And the scenario I described just a moment ago would probably be one of those impossible situations. So a few rules of thumb, and we often use rules of thumb when we're discussing a lot of the biological systems that we operate on. But horses generally need between 1% and 2% of their daily diet as forage. So for an example, 1,000-pound horses between 10 and 20 pounds a day. The recommendations are very varied, but generally from 1 to 3 acres of pasture per horse. And the density certainly depends on our turnout time. And you could read these going from a half an acre with less than 3 hours per day all the way up to greater than 2 acres generally considered for unlimited turnout time. And there are several factors, obviously, that go into this. We're going to go over a few of them right now. Oops, something froze up. And it's important to remember that these densities can be higher or lower based on a whole host of factors, including the grazing habits of your animals. We joke around about the horse that go out and look at grass and gain weight. The grass species that are out there, some of our forage species, and we're not going to talk about those much today, but some of our forage species, just because of their physiology, are not very well suited for grazing. Timothy is a big one that we think about based on the how Timothy stores its energy for the following season. It's not a very good grazing grass. The pasture health, we're going to talk about evaluating our pasture health in just a moment. Your opportunity to rotate is really going to have a lot to do with how many animals you can have onto an acre. And if you're feeding supplemental feed and what type of supplemental feed you're feeding. All these factors would go into helping you decide whether or not you can increase or to have to decrease your stocking densities. Just want to touch on a little bit of basic grass growth. And grasses are, like all plants, are the best way to think about them are photosynthetic factories. So they take light and energy from the sun and other things that go into it. And you've all probably heard photosynthesis before. And the out product is carbohydrates that help the plant in growth and development. So grazing actually interrupts this cycle. Obviously, we're removing surface area that can receive light. And as you can see on this, the picture all the way to the left would be under a poor grazing management. And you can see the plant is taking so much of its energy into trying to sustain its above ground portion or its top growth of the crop. And it doesn't have a whole lot of energy to put into reserves, into the roots. The middle picture is a little bit better with some grazing management. And as you can see, the root system's getting a little bit better. But as we're maintaining a little bit of a higher grazing height, then we do allow for a little bit better growth and development of that crop. And as you can see all the way to the right, with limited grazing or a highly managed grazing system, you can develop a very high canopy of growth as well as having a good thick lush growth in the root system. And a lot of our species of grass store lots of their energy in the root system, and this becomes very important for a whole host of reasons. But as I already mentioned, for storage of energy and also its ability to take nutrients and actually scavenge into the soil for the nutrients in the water that it needs for growth and development. So plant density is something that we really want to pay a lot of attention to when we're evaluating our pastures as well. A lot of our pastures are very much so overgrazed, and this overgrazing leads to poor stands, certainly leads to increased weed pressure, and we really want to actually go out and evaluate what's going on in our pasture and what the plant density is before we go and make a renovation decision. And how we do this is twofold, and I'm going to give you the two main ways that we do. One's a little more academic, and the other one is a much more practical method. So while we're evaluating a pasture stand, what we're really trying to do is determine the percentage of desirable forage, whether we're looking at grasses or some of the legume species. We really want to have an understanding of what percentage of that field is the grass or forage that we're actually looking for. And we also want to be able to identify some of the weed species that are out there. This is particularly important when we're thinking about toxic weeds and such. Now, the two methods that we use to evaluate pasture stands, a little bit more of an academic method that we use, and some of my colleagues and I have participated in these studies, is what we call the square method. And what we're basically doing is we're taking a square of a known area and we're going out to random places in a field and simply throwing it out there. And we calculate the percentage of the species that we want, of what we see in that field. We also use this method an awful lot when we're trying to evaluate harvests in pastures and trying to get a really good feel for what the yield is in some of our pastures. So this is a pretty effective way of managing, but it's certainly time consuming. There's a little bit more math involved, and it does take a lot more time to get an accurate representation of what's going on in your field. The method that I'm really going to focus on tonight is what we call the string intercept method. And this is a really simple method, and it only requires a few tools. And I'm going to go over this method in some detail. So the string intercept method is a quick and accurate method to assess your pasture. It requires very little tools, a little bit of math, but the math is certainly not taxing. And basically all you need to do the string intercept method is a string or a 25-foot tape measure, a clipboard or a notepad, and something to write with. And just so you can look up this fact sheet, one of our colleagues had written this fact sheet. You can click on that link, or somebody can copy it into the chat window for me, please. It'd be great. You can go and read the entire fact sheet for yourself. So the string intercept method, we generally do a spring assessment, and there's a few reasons why. It's easier to identify individual grass plants. It's certainly easier to identify bare soils because we don't have to get into a tall growing or lush growing field. And it's really good for us to identify individual weeds. So as we're going through and using the string intercept method, a spring around this time is a pretty ideal time to actually go out and evaluate your pastures. So what you're going to do when you're using the string intercept method is you're going to simply select random areas in your pasture. You're going to stretch the tape across the surface of the field. And again, it's to 25 feet. And what you need to do is write on a piece of paper 4 columns. And on the headers of these columns, you're going to write bare soil, desirable forage, weeds. And if you can't identify the weed name or the species, you can go ahead and write that as well. Now, we always joke around that we do not get a cut of the sales of this book, but this is a great resource for folks that are maybe need a little help identifying the weeds in your pasture. And you can get this on several sites. At one point in time, we had a grant. We were giving them out as part of our educational programming. But this is a really good resource, particularly for weeds of the Northeast. And it has great pictures, and it gives you a really good way to help identify some of the weed species that you're probably going to encounter in your pastures. So this is just a visual of the chart, how we do it. And as you can see here, bare soil, grass cover, weeds, and the weed name. And what we're going to simply do is get out there and walk in our fields. Okay. Another really good benefit of having using the string intercept method to evaluate our pastures is it forces us to get out and walk the entire field. So what you simply do is you stretch out the tape, as I mentioned, to 25 feet, and you walk along the tape, stopping at every 6 inches. And when you get to that 6-inch mark, or the foot mark, whichever it is, you simply record what you see at each stop. So by the time you go through one 25-foot section, you'll actually have 50 observations across that distance. And all you simply do is you repeat that. And so what you end up with is 100 stops. So as you can see from the picture on the lower right, you just simply go through and count the ticks based on what you've encountered every 6 inches across that 25-foot distance. And if you add up these columns, each column total will actually become a percentage because we're using 100 as our total number of observations. So you can simply go through and count up, and we're going to go through some rules of thumb and when we decide whether or not we're going to actually renovate or not in just a moment. But simply going through and figuring out how many stops had bare soil or grass cover or the weeds, will give you the percentage of each of those columns across the section of your pasture. Now, again, we talked about rules of thumb, and Christian's going to talk about some renovation techniques in just a few minutes. But generally speaking, when we're thinking about renovation, I like to think if we have less than 50% of the desirable forages, I generally would start thinking about a complete renovation. Now, a complete renovation takes on several forms, whether we're going to, what I call kill and drill, we're going to completely kill all the pasture and come in with a no-till drill and actually drill in. There's a couple of different methods that we can use through some more of the conventional tillage type operations. As you could see in the center picture where the field was actually plowed and rolled, and then we came in with a brilliant seeder to oversee that pasture. Now, if we have 50 to 70% desirable forages in our field, this is generally where we want to think a little bit about our situation. And when we get into this range of desirable forages, I generally think about overseeding. Now, this is a great opportunity for some of the equipment that Christian's going to talk about in just a little bit, because it's minimally invasive to the pasture, and you can actually come in and overseed with a no-till drill, such as the one on the left in this bottom picture, and actually really increase your stand density of the desirable forage. And generally speaking, if we have 70% or greater desirable forages, this is where I really start to focus all of my energy on maintaining that pasture. Whether we're talking about looking at our fertility scheme and managing for fertility, pH in particular is a big concern when we're into the maintenance operations of our pasture, that we're happy with the growth. Rotational grazing is a really important one, and we've had several discussions in the past about rotational grazing and incorporating sacrifice areas and such. So rotational grazing would be part of the maintenance strategy as well. And we also want to think about weed control and weed management, whether we're simply doing this with a clipping or herbicide, whichever method that we are used to using or comfortable using. These are all the factors that we would consider when we're thinking about maintaining a healthy pasture. So we're going to switch over to Christian in just a minute, but what happens if I am satisfied with my pastures? So these are some of the considerations that we might want to think about, whether or not we're going to go out and overseed, or if we decide that we're happy with our pasture and really want to focus a lot of our energy on a proper rotational scheme. So if you are happy with your pasture, then we would certainly go back to paying attention to the first management scheme. But if you're not happy with your pasture, now Christian's going to talk about some of the methods that he has access to and some of the methods that he recommends for coming back and doing some of the renovation that you might consider doing in your pasture. Christian, I'm going to stop and see if stop sharing.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, you touched on some really good points, and I'm going to probably just share a little bit of my experiences and talk about the no-till drill that North Jersey RC&D has available to Northern New Jersey to rent out to do some of these pasture renovations you talked about. Can you guys see that, or?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, basically, I'm going to talk about no-till drill basics and pasture renovation tips. Steve did a good job touching on, kind of when to overseed and when to renovate. And generally speaking, I want to focus on the physical properties of the field as well. So if the field is rough, bumpy, presents hazards to livestock, you want to consider completely renovating that pasture and starting from scratch. That involves chisel plowing, disking twice, packing, prepping that seed bed to get a completely new stand in that pasture. And that is typical of new fields that you might have bought a farm and and it just, they're older pastures, they're rough, the terrain is rough and not suitable for livestock. So that's when you want to kind of consider to fully renovate as well. Again, Steve's 50% rule is really good. That's right on par with what I believe. If your pasture grasses just aren't desirable anymore and you have that less than 50% desirable, I would go ahead and renovate completely as well. One of the things about renovating too, it's really possible to put a small grain in prior to renovating that pasture. That small grain, such as rye, oats, or wheat, is actually going to kind of naturally set up that soil as well and reduce weeds and whatnot. And then the following year, you can go in and no-till into that, rye and oats after you kill it off. And that's a really good way. I've actually done it myself and had really good luck with that. Again, overseed of the existing pastures are still desirable, but have become spotty. Populations are diminished, but pH levels and nutrient levels are low and whatnot. I would go ahead and overseed. If you still have, again, that 50% to 70% desirable species, but the pastures have become spotty because of overgrazing, nutrient level problems, whatnot. I would definitely go ahead and overseed with that. And we'll talk about different overseeding techniques. The most popular is the no-till drill. We'll get into that in a little bit. The other thing is just overall overseeding is really good if you have a pasture, an existing pasture that is pretty much on par, but you want to introduce a species to diversify that pasture. So if you want to add a legume or a timothy or other grass, cool season grass species that will meet the dietary needs of your livestock, you can go ahead and do that. As far as seedbed preparation, that would all depend, again, if you're renovating or overseeding. Be sure little to no rocks exist in the pasture and the pasture is somewhat smooth. Deciding to fully renovate or overseed will determine a lot of the setup requirements on any kind of seeding equipment. So again, when you're overseeding or when you're renovating, when you actually drill the seed, that will determine a lot of how you set that seed drill up, and we'll get into that a little later. Seedbed preparation, again, when seeding, you don't want to seed into a seed bed that is really wet. I mean, we'll get into that in a little bit, but tacky soil conditions are not conducive to any kind of cool season grass seeding. Again, a lot of my experience revolves around seeding pastures in the fall. I'm a big proponent of seeding cool season grasses in the fall. And I would say kind of late summer to fall as well. Put that in that category. End of August to beginning of October as the cutoff. A lot of times we have Indian summers and you can get away with that October-ish seeding for cool season grasses, and I've actually had really good luck with that. Again, soil types vary across the state. So from South Jersey to North Jersey, we're going to have all different type of soil types and conditions, and that's going to dictate how and when you plant. And then as far as renovation tips, especially with overseeding or doing a completely new seeding, stick with the basics. I see so many failures due to, kind of pushing the limits and not coming up with a really good seed mix that's conducive for our area, where it's going to meet the needs of your livestock. The proven ones around here are orchard grass, meadow brome, timothy, and Kentucky bluegrass. There's some others that we can, certainly get into, but I feel that with my experience and doing this a lot on my own, I tend to tell clients to stick with the basics on this. So, and a lot of times these mixtures are available pre-mixed from, different seed companies in the area, and they can kind of cater to your needs and your dietary needs of that horse or livestock, to really, again, match your soil conditions, your livestock, your soil type to that species. And that's really important. A lot of failures I've seen revolve around overseeding pastures and choosing the wrong species to overseed with. A lot of the existing cool season grasses in that pasture are very aggressive. Orchard grass is aggressive. And if you go ahead and overseed, some of these smaller seeds that require, just a lot of sunlight, and they get into that canopy that's, established and more aggressive than them, they're bound for failure off the bat. And that's one of the biggest things. And planting depth. Planting depth is really, really key when you're renovating or overseeding. That's probably one of the most important things. And a lot of these seeds are going to be 1/8 inch to a 1/2 inch max. And I don't even like to say half. I want to say quarter. A lot of times you're just dribbling it on the top. And if you follow, again, you want to have a really good plan going into this, whether you decide to overseed or to renovate. Are you going to disc, prep the seed bed and all that? Do you have the equipment to do that? That requires a lot more equipment. And do you have it on your farm? Can you get a local farmer to do it for you? Those are all the questions you need to have in your head prior to deciding whether to renovate or overseed pastures. So, and I'll get into, a lot of people we throw out the word overseeding a lot, and we use that because it's easy, right? It's you basically run a no-till drill and you run it over existing pasture, and you hope that the seed comes up, and it truly is that easy as long as your planting depth is correct. But there's a lot of myths that come with that. Overseeding is a popular method. It does not mean it's successful all the time. And as I discussed before, many failures are due to existing grass competition on vulnerable new seedings and weed and pest pressures. If you have a lot of weed pressure, you don't want to be overseeding to begin with. You want to do a really, as Steve got into, you want to do a really good population and pasture assessment before you decide to do anything. And if you have weeds, noxious weeds, and if you don't want to spray, I would say renovating is the best way to take care of your needs that way. Again, some of the physical things with no-till drill and overseeding: seed to soil contact. If you have a heavy existing grass sod, and you're planting in the dry months of end of August, early September, you're dealing with a dry, compacted soil to begin with. Throw in that heavy existing sod, and it's almost a recipe for disaster. So it's really important, again, match that species, soil type, planting time, as best as possible to have the most success. One of the things that I have found that I need to do to get a really good, successful overseeding stand is to make a hatch pattern, a cross hatch pattern, where I would go one direction with the seed drill, and then I would go the opposite direction across the field. What that does is it moves the soil around both ways. You're getting that cross hatch, which I feel is a little bit more successful in no-till pasture renovation situations. Again, none of this is, you want to have all your soil pH levels and macronutrients up to snuff before you do any of the renovation or overseeding. And that's where you start first with a soil test. And I can't, explain that enough. We all know that we need a soil test, every 2 to 3 years. And be sure that you have, a recent one before you go ahead and overseed or renovate. Again, we have all this talk about no-till drills, and there's a whole host of different implements that seed pastures and seed crops and everything. But one of the most popular ones that we talk about now is a no-till drill. So what is a no-till drill, and why is it different than conventional drills? So a no-till drill has coulters in the front of the row unit mechanisms. Those coulters cut and slice previous crop residue, and they also can slice into that existing sod. They start the form of a trench, and that opening disc is what forms the seed furrow. Okay, after that opening disc, there is a set of closing wheels. The closing wheels is what basically firms up the seed trench and closes that trench. It makes the drill really versatile, and it is able to plant through very difficult situations, whereas a lot of other drills, they don't have that capability. So yeah, again, the big difference is the coulters. And the next slide, I have a picture of the coulter so you all know. That's a coulter, which is basically in the front of the machine before the opening discs and seed tubes. What that coulter does is it's wavy, and it basically, like I said, it slices that trench open, cuts that residue. You can see I'm no-tilling through corn and cover crop in this picture, and it's slicing right through it and making a really good furrow. And that's the start of a successful seeding, right? You have to have a really, really good seed to soil contact, a furrow, where that seed has the best chance to get off to a really good start. I mean, we have so many variables in this business, weather, tons of rain anymore, just so many things against us. Our planter needs to be really a good machine, a quality machine, and to start with have good success. No-till drills have different seeding capabilities. Most of them are equipped with 2 boxes. That's a large seed box and a legume box, or a small seed box. So in your large seed box, you're going to put your cereal grains. You can do soybeans. All your larger seeds go in the big seed box. The smaller seed box in the back is going to have your legumes, your timothys, and their smaller seeds. So this particular no-till drill that North Jersey RC&D owns actually has 3 seed boxes. It has a middle seed box that can do fluffy, warm season grasses. Again, no-till drills come in a variety of different sizes. They can accommodate smaller fields. This particular drill can go into a 12-foot gate. Sometimes I could push it and get into a 10 to 11-foot space, but I generally like to say 12-foot. Again, this particular drill is not too heavy, not too big. A variety of people, if you have a 55 horsepower tractor or more, you're more than likely able to run this. And I'll get into a little bit about our rental program in a bit. So North Jersey RC&D has a drill rental program for landowners and farmers wishing to rent a drill. We tend to stick to the Hunterdon, Warren, Sussex County areas. We could probably talk about going into Mercer in the right situation, but generally speaking, we like to stick to North Jersey. Again, we offer it for pasture renovation and overseeding, cover cropping, and planting wildlife habitat, warm season grasses, and wildflowers. So, North Jersey RC&D drill rental program, you can contact me if you have any questions about it, if you want to reserve it. In the spring and fall is when it's most popular, and I'll just get you on a list, and I try to move it, kind of have a strategic plan to move it across the northern New Jersey based on what people are planning and whatnot. But we charge $250 for the first 10 acres and then $25 per acre over each acre over that 10 acres. So, and we also have a delivery and pickup service for a fee. It is housed at the Hunterdon County Soil Conservation District. So you could pick it up there, or you can contact me and I can drop it off, and I can actually pick it up as well when you're done with it. So my contact info is on the first and last page of these slides, and again, this will make this shareable for everybody. They can look at that. I'll go through the tractor requirements and the drill model information. So the drill model is a 706 no-till drill from Great Plains. It's a 7.5-foot seating width and has 12 rows that are spaced at 7.5 inches between rows. The smallest gate the drill can fit into is 12 foot wide. A tractor with 55 horsepower or more is required to operate the drill. It's a little heavy of a machine. I don't like to say less than 55 horsepower. And again, if you can call me to discuss what tractor you have. I can look at your tractor and say yes or no, you can't use that. So the tractor also must have 2 hydraulic remotes that accept Pioneer style hose fittings. So any newer tractor will accept a Pioneer style hose fitting. Again, I can work with producers to see if their tractor is fit for the job. That's not a problem. And again, I can't stress enough, cool season grass seeding starts with a really good sound plan, and deciding whether to renovate or overseed is vital to the success and your desires as a producer for your livestock. Happy grasses equal happy livestock. There's no question about that. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact with me. I have my contact information there, and I'll try to help you out in any way I can. So I have a lot of experience with doing this personally, and have learned over the years and with successes and failures, and kind of so I definitely can give you some tips and point you in the right direction. So thank you, guys.
Christian, thank you so much. Harry Williams, I'm going to hop in here because I saw some questions come up, and I actually have this very same question since I'm located down in Monmouth County. But there was a lot of people that were asking, is this in South Jersey? Is this in Burlington County? Is this elsewhere in the state?
Right. I'm going to say no. We have to. This was bought through a grant for specifically North Jersey. And again, for those counties that I've mentioned. I will say that if you have a special circumstance and you're kind of close to Hunterdon County, call me and we can discuss it,
So no other RC&Ds have done the same thing that you have?
No, they have not. They have not. And it would be something we'd love to work with other RC&Ds in the state. I know there is one other RC&D in the state, and we could certainly try to get them to purchase one. It is an excellent program. We got it last year, and the program's taken off. I mean, we probably did 300 or 400 acres with it this spring alone. So,
Sure, this is Bill Bampka. The South Jersey RC&D used to have the drill. I think they now have it in the Cape Atlantic district. Might have the drill that was bought probably about 15 years ago. I would contact the Cape Atlantic district. I do know growers have used it, but sometimes nobody knows whose barn it's in.
right.
Got it. There are more questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll make sure they get answered by one of the panelists. guess we answered everybody's questions. Either that or everybody's gone to refill their wine. Does it have any real utility? Not exactly sure what that means, but Christian or someone want to answer that or address that? And then can someone also talk about aeration?
Real utility is what? As in a no-till drill?
Oh, aeration. It looks like it's the same person asking if
Oh.
if there's a
Does aeration have
possibility of
utility? Absolutely. And I mean, I think Steve could probably back me up on that.
Yeah, especially when
have-
we're talking about heavy compacted soils.
Yeah.
Water
Yeah.
infiltration and such would be a really important thing. Bill might want to throw something in there too as well, knowing his background from previous careers.
What you mean, the aeration issue? I mean,
Well,
yeah, the no-tilling does make a big improvement actually on the soil health, and there's a lot of issues with the no-till. I have farmers I work with down in Burlington County have been no-tilling soybeans for 35, 40 years, and you can see a big improvement in the soil.
Two more questions I saw. One, Christian, do you go to Northern Westchester? I think it was.
Northern Westchester,
I'm not sure where that is. It doesn't say what.
like Chester, New Jersey? Chester, we would.
Northern Westchester. If
New York.
Westchester, Pennsylvania?
New York. No, it is New York.
No, that's too far, unfortunately.
There is a drill in the southern tier. I can't remember which group has it, but there is a drill going around that section of New York. I don't know if Westchester is part of it though.
And someone actually asked to the crowd suggestions for those of us who don't own tractors. Can you suggest people that might be able to come out to perform the overseeding?
Yeah, in my experience, there's many local farmers that you can get in touch with in your area that offer those services as well. A lot of times these guys buy no-till drills to plant soybeans, but the drill's $45,000 for them to buy, so they go ahead and start a small seeding business to renovate pastures on the side for people, and there's plenty of farmers in the area that could do it. Again, it's do those pastures have gates that their equipment can't fit in? A lot of times their equipment's much bigger than this drill that we own, so that's why there's limitations a lot of times.
Would any landscapers have a tractor big enough for the drill yet small enough to fit in, say, a 10 to 15 acre farm? Do you think, Christian?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's always an option too. Yeah.
Also, here's another one. How long after liming and fixing the nutrient deficiencies can you seed?
Generally, the rule of thumb is lime takes time.
Right.
If you plant too soon with pH is too low, you're risking putting a lot of money in the seed that's not going to do well. It depends how bad. It depends what the soil test said. That's our typical extension answer. It depends. But if the pH is too low, you might be waiting 6 months or so till you can plant. So I guess the point there is to back up, think of when you want to do a renovation. If you want to do a renovation this coming August, September period, you probably want to pull a soil test at least 6 months beforehand.
Yeah, so good time to get out there now then. And I know the Rutgers soil lab opened on May 6th. So there you go. They're going to get inundated with everybody doing their soil test after this webinar. I put lima down on untouched pastures now and then plant in October. October might be late, but
First step is to take a soil test. You don't know how much lime you even need. You
Right.
can't just stare at a pasture and tell what the fertility is. Or if you can, let me know. I'll hire you.
Yeah, so if the soil test's done, then I would definitely say get your get your lime and everything on there, and then don't wait until October 1st to seed. I would get it on there in, early September.
Yeah, and a lot of the success will depend on what the weather is during this season, because in order for lime to react with the soil, a particle of lime has to be with a particle of water in contact with a particle of soil. So we have to have the right weather conditions to actually get the lime into the root zone to actually change the pH. So it has a lot of weather dependent factors as well.
Right.
Your other big issue could be typically what I see are a lot of pastures have not had a fertility program, so the pH is very low, and it could actually take 2 lime applications to get the pH up to where it should be. And you can't just do them back to back. You have to apply and then wait several months and then put another application down. That does happen sometimes. So first step would be to grab that soil test to figure out where you're at.
Oh, and someone did mention that the turnaround time at the soil testing lab is very short, so they must not have a whole lot of backlog samples. So that's good to know. And then someone says, can you put lime on an actively grazed pasture? I know what we do, but what should they do?
Depends on what livestock.
I'm going to assume horses. Yes, horses.
I personally no, but
Usually I would wait. I think we wait a few days or till a good rain. That's I know what you should do is pull them off, get the lime down, wait for a good rain, and then your judgment, I guess.
Sometimes just a day or two of heavy dew will do it too. You don't even need a rain, just enough so you don't get any dust.
Cool. Well, I think we're 10 minutes over. Mike, are you able to speak now? You want to take over? We're still not hearing Mike. I don't know. Something must have happened to his microphone. I know you were working at the beginning, Mike, so.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go. There you are.
Hear me now. I'm not sure what happened. But yeah, just remind people that these presentations will be up at the Equine Science Center website within, probably a week to 2 weeks, maybe sooner. And we've got more meetings planned for tomorrow evening. Bill is going to give us a weed ID course in 20 minutes, I think. And then I'm going to talk about manure management on pastures. And then Caitlin Farbotnik who's the state agronomist with USDA, she's going to talk with us about some different EQIP programs, the environmental quality incentive programs, which you all can use for perhaps getting some funding for different conservation practices on your farms. And certainly renovation and cover crops is something that NRCS cost shares for producers. So yeah, and we'll start tomorrow night again, just like tonight at 7 o'clock, and it should go about the same length of time.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.